Hello dear students, I am Dr. Brinpreet and today I will be discussing with you the bargaining theory. So let's first introduce. The concept of bargaining is a common one used in daily parlance. People negotiate and bargain amongst each other over a variety of matters. Government at the central and state levels usually negotiate amongst themselves or even with the cabinet ministers. The government of a particular country is also usually engaged in a variety of international negotiations, especially on matters related to economic issues, national security, or even environmental issues. Similarly, many economic exchange issues also involve negotiations in daily life, such as prices, wages, etc. Any such situation where exchange takes place and in which a pair of individuals or organizations can enter into a mutually beneficial trade or exchange agreement, even though they might have conflicting interests over the terms of trade, will be called a bargaining situation. A bargaining situation, as defined in simple terms, will be a situation in which two or more players will have a common interest in cooperating but may have conflicting interests over how exactly to cooperate. There can primarily be two reasons for the parties to be interested in bargaining situations. One practical reason is that many important and interesting human interactions, that is economic, social, or even political, are usually bargaining situations. The usual situations of exchange between two parties are most often bargaining situations. In the field of social interaction, a married couple, for example, is involved in many bargaining situations throughout their relationship. Similarly, in a political situation, for example, a bargaining situation exists when no single party can form a government on its own. Another important reason for the transacting parties to enter into bargaining situation is that understanding such a situation is fundamental to the understanding of the working of a market and its appropriateness, and therefore an understanding of the prevalent policies that exist in the arena of the problem. The main issue faced by the players in a bargaining situation is the need to reach an agreement over exactly how to cooperate. Consequently, each player prefers to reach some agreement rather than remain in disagreement and not reach any conclusive outcome. At the same time, the players would like to reach an agreement that is as favorable to them as possible. This is one reason why the players typically reach an agreement after a costly delay, as witnessed throughout history in the form of trade wars, military wars, strikes, or even divorce. A number of questions arise pertaining to the bargaining theory. For example, what factors will determine the outcome of negotiations, or what are the strategies that help to improve bargaining power, or what variables determine whether the parties to a territorial dispute will reach a negotiation and a settlement, or whether the parties will negotiate or enter into a war with each other. The bargaining theory seems to answer all such questions that pertain to various bargaining situations encountered in life. Now let us talk about the bargaining situations and the bargaining process. Bargaining theory develops an economic theory of property in the subject of law and economics. Bargaining theory works at the very foundation of the economic theory of property. An example of the sale of a used car can explain the application of the bargaining theory. We assume the case of a man named Adam who lives in a small town and has a convertible car that is in a good condition. For him, the value of owning and driving the car is equal to $3,000. Blair, a woman in the same city, has been coveting the car for years together and plans it to buy the car from Adam. She inherits $5,000, and after inspecting the car, she decides the experience, the pleasure of owning and driving the car to be valued for $4,000. An agreement between the buyer and the seller will enable Blair, who values the car at $4,000, to purchase it from Adam, who values it at $3,000. The potential seller assesses the car at a value less than the potential buyer, and that is why there is scope for a bargain. In any case, Adam will not accept less than $3,000 for the car, and Blair will not pay more than $4,000, and hence the sale price of the car will lie between these two limits only. Game theory can also express the logic of the bargaining situation. According to game theory, both parties will settle the deal at a point where they can benefit by cooperating with each other. As a result, the solution requires that the resource be moved from someone who values it less to someone who values it more. In this case, Adam values the car less than Blair, and the exchange creates a value of $1,000, which is the difference between the value assessed by Adam, that is $3,000, and the value assigned by Blair, which is $4,000. When the resource is passed on to a place where it is valued more, it creates a value called the cooperative surplus. How much of the surplus each person receives depends upon the price at which the car will be sold. If the price is settled at $3,500, each of them will receive an equal share of the surplus, that is $500 created by the exchange. If, however, the price is fixed at $3,800, the value will be divided unequally because Adam will get $800, whereas Blair will benefit only by $200. Similarly, if the price is determined at $3,200, Adam will enjoy $200 of the value created, whereas Blair will enjoy $800 of the surplus value. Now here arises the need to bargain. The two parties will continue to bargain with each other over the price and will keep on negotiating till they either close the deal or withdraw from the exchange. Under such circumstances, they either successfully negotiate or fail to bargain in the process. If the negotiation breaks down and the parties fail to cooperate, they will not be able to move the resource from a less valuable use to a more valuable use and hence fail to create value in the process. The application of game theory to this example can help us understand the possible outcomes of a cooperative solution and a non-cooperative solution. The cooperative solution will be one in which Adam and Blair reach an agreement over a particular price and are able to successfully exchange the car for money. But in the non-cooperative solution, they fail to settle down on a price and do not exchange the car for money. When there is failure in cooperation, each person has some level of welfare on his own. The bargaining theory thus ends up creating more value for a resource when there is a cooperative solution than in the case of a non-cooperative solution. This is why in the case of costly trials, the parties can usually gain by settling out of court. Assuming that the chances of either side winning in a trial in a court are 50% for each side, accompanied by an additional cost of litigation, it will always be a fair deal to settle the matter out of court, since the cost of selling it out of court will almost be nil. Therefore, settling the matter out of court not only saves the cost of a trial, but also leads to a better outcome compared to non-cooperating and attempting to resolve the dispute. Any theory explaining bargaining usually focuses on the efficiency and distribution properties of the outcome of bargaining. The efficiency criteria in the theory of bargaining relate to the possibility that the players either fail to reach an agreement or come to a conclusive result only after a costly delay. For example, the distributive property of bargaining theory addresses how the players divide the gains from cooperation in the deal when they reach an agreement regarding wages after a significant loss of production due to long strikes, or when peace is settled or negotiated following the loss of many lives in the war. Now we move on to discuss the theories of bargaining, and the first amongst them is the positive theory of bargaining. The theory of bargaining usually mixes two activities, production and distribution. While production indicates creating value in the good, distribution refers to the allocation of value among people. Now let us discuss this. The debate between conflict and cooperation. The fundamental knowledge of economics emphasizes that the amount of resources must be given weight over the number of wants we wish to fulfill. That is why the policymakers always keep this in mind before they engage in the fundamental activity of budgeting. When the total budget of a country is fixed, every rupee spent on one project is a rupee not spent on another project, which is its opportunity cost. That is, allocating expenditure on the projects is a zero-sum game. For every player to win, another one must lose, because the sum of wins and losses is zero. Since the value gets distributed but not produced, the allocation of items in a fixed budget is a game of pure distribution. In contrast to the games of pure distribution are the games of pure production, which are also called coordination games. In a coordination game, value is produced without creating any conflict over its distribution. As a result, the interests of all the players coincide, an outcome that suits any one player suits all the players equally. For example, if there are a group of drivers who are to decide whether they should drive on the left or the right side of the road, the decision will be suitable to all as long as they all make the same choice. Now, this will again mean that moving from a non-cooperative solution to a cooperative solution will create value for all the players. Mixed bargains. Now, most of the bargaining games are not pure, rather they are mixed because they involve production as well as distribution. The parties can cooperate among themselves and indulge in production, provided they can come to an agreement on the issue of distribution. In the example of Adam and Blair, if the two players act on the basis of rationality, they must agree to a price between $3,000 and $4,000 because any price in this range will benefit both parties as compared to a situation of non-cooperation. But how much price is settled at the end remains unpredictable because it does not simply depend upon rationality but also partially depends upon the psychology of the parties. In this case, though, the exact bargain is unpredictable, yet the bargaining theory provides a useful rule of thumb solution which says that a rational distribution must give each player an equal share of the cooperative surplus. Therefore, in the example above, Adam and Blair are able to reach a reasonable distribution if they both receive their threat values plus half of the cooperative surplus, that is $3,500 each. Now, in the game theory, such a distribution of the surplus is also called the Nash bargaining solution, which is based on the economic concept of rationality and the legal concept of reasonable behavior. Now, let's move to talk about the Coase theorem. The concept of bargaining entails transaction costs in the form of paying rent for the venue where the bargaining has to be done, the value of the time spent in negotiations, and the cost of drafting an agreement. If the transaction costs are higher, the probability of the bargain being successful is less, but if the transaction costs fall, the probability of the bargain being successful is higher. This can also be illustrated using another example of a hotel manager playing loud music at night and a neighbor whose sleep is disturbed by the noise. We assume here that the hotel manager playing music incurs business for $500 by playing the music and the neighbor values his peaceful sleep at $100. Now, if they try to bargain and the hotel manager agrees to pay $300 to the neighbor, he can continue to operate with the music yet gain $200, which is $500 from his business income minus the $300 that he pays to the neighbor, while the neighbor earns $200, which is the difference of the $300 received as compensation minus the $100 for the worth of his peaceful sleep. In this case, both parties would prefer the deal rather than refuse it. Thus, the Coase theorem explains the fact that bargaining will help to allocate legal entitlements to the parties who value them more, provided the transaction cost does not impede the bargaining process. Normative theory of bargaining is what we will discuss now. It can be easily observed that in all the institutions of public law, whether committees, bodies, or councils, the concept of bargaining benefits the participants. However, in all such transactions, the parties that bargain more are the officials and not the citizens. This means that the bargaining is more of a political bargaining. Efficiency and distribution are the two policy parameters that influence politics and dominate economics. Political bargaining can be assessed using these two concepts. Let's first discuss efficiency. The Coase theorem, as already discussed, states that bargaining activity allocates legal entitlements to the parties who value them more, provided transaction costs do not impede exchange. In normative economics, when an entitlement is allocated to a person who values it more, it is called an efficient allocation. This further helps in restating the Coase theorem to emphasize that bargaining leads to an allocation of legal entitlements more efficiently among the participants, especially when the transaction costs are zero. This will also mean that a change from an inefficient to an efficient allocation of a legal entitlement will create a surplus, and this surplus can be achieved either by using a public law or by striking a private deal based on bargaining. If the transaction cost of public bargaining, that means enforcing the law, is lower than that of private bargaining, then the law can be utilized as a more efficient means of achieving the surplus. On the contrary, if the transaction cost of public bargaining is higher than that of private bargaining, then negotiating and coming to a private agreement is a more efficient means of achieving the surplus. Now let's discuss distribution and social welfare. There is usually a consensus with regards to the concept of efficiency, but a disagreement with respect to the concept of distribution. Many policymakers and jurists believe that equal distribution of the wealth of a society is a better idea, but economists largely differ on this notion. For example, in the case of the hotel manager who operates with a surplus of $400, different group of thinkers will have different perspectives. The people who support the idea of gain from redistribution specifically disagree with the people who support the idea of loss from the transaction. Therefore, the neighbor who gains from his right to a peaceful sleep will favor the implementation of a noise regulation, whereas the hotel manager who gains from the business will condemn the law. Since there is disagreement about distribution, there will be an equal disagreement on how much efficiency should be sacrificed for equality. The analysis of the disagreement about efficiency and distribution is related to how the two concepts are valued. Economists usually discuss value in terms of utility, which means an individual's well-being, that is, the factors like his health, family, social standing, etc. Economic analysis holds that when a person's welfare increases, the utility that he derives from various factors increases as well. However, when money is brought in to measure utility, it is believed that utility starts declining. A huge amount of money holds immense value to a poor or homeless person, but holds little value to a millionaire. Thus, transferring money from one person to another does not increase the amount of wealth, but it certainly changes the utility derived from it. We move on to discuss bargaining failures. The positive and normative theory of bargaining led us to generalize that if the transaction costs are low, the transacting parties can reach a point of mutual gain. In some situations, bargaining helps to achieve successful outcomes, whereas in other situations it fails. A good theory of bargaining attempts to identify the causes and remedies of failure situations. The issue of bargaining failure can be related to the economic theory of market failure. This will help in correlating the cause of bargaining failure to its remedial measures. As was discussed in the module on market failures and externalities, markets fail because of situations like monopolies, externalities, or asymmetric information. In the case of externalities, problems like free riding occur because of non-rivalry and non-excludability, and since free riding impedes bargaining, it can be referred to as a transaction cost. In such a situation, the cost theorem can be used to devise a solution to the problem. Using the theorem, it can be stated that if transaction costs can help mitigate free riding, bargaining can help overcome the externalities. In cases where the number of people involved in the transaction is smaller, merely the use of social norms can help overcome free riding. But if the number of people associated with the transaction is large, then only legislation can help mitigate free riding and hence help in distributing the benefits of a transaction more efficiently among the people of the country. Now, to conclude, I would like to say that bargaining is an effective concept used for explaining the theories and issues in the subject of law and economics. Bargaining theory can help to allocate a resource from a place where it is valued less to a place where it is valued more. The process of bargaining is always long and time-consuming, and that is why the emphasis of the bargaining theory usually lies on the efficiency and distributive criteria achieved through bargaining. The positive theory of bargaining is based on two major activities, that is the games of production and the games of distribution. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.